From KCRW in Santa Monica, I'm Claude Brodesser-Ackner, and this is The Business.
So you still want to do the show business, and you think that you got what it takes? I mean, you really got to rap and be all that, and prepare yourself for the breaks. Check it out.
This week on The Business, in a town where actors are more likely to wait tables than wait in the wings, how do you define a working actor? That's the central question in our lively conversation with actors Ron Livingston and Ned Vaughn. How Screen Actors Guild members answer that question may determine if there's a strike. Plus, a look at what's popping at this year's ShoWest Movie Exhibitors Conference. But first, it's the Hollywood News Caravan. Go nowhere, it's The Business from NPR. Bob Yari was one of 6 producers credited in the making of the 2005 film Crash. Even though it won Best Picture that year, he didn't get an Oscar, because the Academy rules state that only 2 producers are eligible. Yari sued, but lost his case last week when the California Appeals Court determined they really didn't have a say in the rules of private organizations. Nevertheless, the legal train wreck over Crash continues. Kathy Schulman was one of the producers who did get a statue for Crash, and she sued Yari, claiming he fired her after she was awarded producer credit, but he wasn't. Yari is also suing Schulman, alleging she embezzled money while in his employ. Meanwhile, Crash director Paul Haggis and producer Robert Moresco are suing Yari, alleging they didn't get their cut of profits before money was paid out to other participants. Who will win in all these suits? Clearly, the lawyers. Elsewhere, the post-apocalyptic drama Jericho has finally gone up in smoke. This time, maybe for good. 11 episodes of the show aired last year before it was shelved for 3 months. And when it finally did return, it aired opposite American Idol. To exactly no one's surprise, it got crushed and got canceled. Fans of Jericho then shelled CBS Entertainment President Nina Tassler with 40,000 pounds of peanuts to protest the show's cancellation. CBS responded by bringing it back for 7 episodes, but the ratings still didn't appease the network, and Jericho was unceremoniously canceled once and for all last week. If the second coming of Jericho suffered from anything, it was a total lack of realism. 23 American cities destroyed by nukes? Credible. The power back on a few months later? Please. You're doing a heck of a job, Tassie. Heck of a job. Finally, Fox Broadcasting said last week that it refuses to pay FCC indecency fines totaling $91,000. The network was nailed for broadcasting an episode of the reality show Married by America, one that included graphic sexual scenes at a bachelor party. Quote, Fox believes that the FCC's decision in this case was arbitrary and capricious, inconsistent with precedent, and patently unconstitutional, said Scott Grogan, Fox's senior VP for corporate communications, adding, besides, there's no way we can pay that kind of scratch this month. Those strippers still have my corporate card. And that's the Hollywood News Caravan. Coming up later in the program, we sent our producer to Las Vegas, and he came back slathered in buttery toppings. But next, one Angelino asks another, what do you do for a living? I'm an actor. Oh yeah? What restaurant? Joining the Screen Actors Guild is a, quote, significant rite of passage for every working actor, unquote, at least according to the union's website. But getting a SAG card is no easy matter.
You are eligible if you have been employed under a SAG contract in a principal or speaking role. There is usually a 3 to 4 week waiting period before our office receives the report from your employer. 2, you are eligible under proof of employment as a SAG-covered background performer for a minimum of any...
In a wonderful catch-22, if an actor has worked in a SAG-approved production, they can become a member of SAG. They can also get in by being a paid working member of an affiliated union.
Our affiliated unions are AFTRA, Actors Equity Association, AGVA, AGMA, and ACTRA.
But getting in and staying in the union is expensive. The initiation fee is $2,277 plus yearly dues. And yet, only a third of the Guild's some 120,000 members earn more than $1,000 a year. With auto workers or grocery clerks, all members of the union are pretty much on the same page. But in Hollywood's creative guilds, there's a gulf between those who work regularly and those who don't. As SAG heads towards its June 30th contract expiration, a debate has erupted within the guild. Some working actors argue that members who haven't worked shouldn't get to vote. If what's known as qualified voting arrives, it will determine who will vote on the actor's new contract. And who gets to vote on the contract may contribute to whether or not there's a strike. But it also raises an age-old question about this roller coaster of a profession. How do you define a working actor when at any given time most actors aren't working? To discuss this controversial proposal, we have two real working actors on opposite sides of the issue. Ron Livingston is against excluding any SAG members from contract voting. He starred in TV shows like Sex and the City and films like Office Space. Also joining us, Ned Vaughn, who's been one of the leaders of the campaign to prevent actors who don't work regularly from voting. Ned's appeared in TV series like NCIS and Kane. A program note, Nikki Fink of Deadline Hollywood Daily kindly reminds us in an email that opinions by Ron Livingston and Ned Vaughn were expressed on her website, quote, first and foremost. We like to give credit where credit is due. Ron Livingston, Ned Vaughn, welcome to the business.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Very nice to be here.
What is qualified voting exactly, and what is being proposed? Let's start with Ned. What are you proposing?
Well, first of all, let me make a little correction, an important one. Qualified voting is a term that's been used for a long time, but it often refers to an earnings threshold and a broader scope of voting restriction than anything we're proposing. What we're proposing is called affected member voting, and that name derives from the fact that the constitutions of both SAG and AFTRA require that contracts be ratified by the membership affected thereby.
Meaning if you don't work the contract, you don't vote on it?
Yes.
All right, so what are the specifics of the language? I mean, basically, if I'm an actor, what do I need to do to vote?
Well, first of all, every contract would have its own standard for being affected. Right now we're concentrating on the TV theatrical contract because it's the next contract that's due to be negotiated.
That's the mothership. That is
the largest
the mother
contract.
of all contracts.
That's right. Our proposal as it currently stands is that one would need to work an average of 5 days per year over 2 contract terms. That's 6 years. I mean, we have to allow a sufficiently long averaging period to accommodate the inevitable ups and downs of this business. We understand that people have bad years.
So that's not even 5 days in 1 year. It's 5 days in over how many?
No, 5 days per year average over 6 years. So a month in 6 years. 30 days over 6 years. That's principal employment. If you're a background performer, it would be 15 days per year. A residual income stream that would be equivalent to 5 days' work, or if you're vested in your pension.
Ron Livingston, let me ask you, how can someone who's not even worked 5 days in a year consider themselves, or be considered, a working actor?
First off, a lot of shows are boarded these days so that if you get a guest spot, you'll come in and you'll shoot it out in one day. So under the specific terms of this proposal, I could work 29 parts on 29 different movies or 29 episodes of television over the last 6 years. I could sign a SAG contract 29 times and still not be considered qualified to vote on the provisions that contract contains. Apart from the content of what this proposal is, I think the timing of it is not the best. As you can hear already, it sort of gets us bogged down in details. It starts separating the membership out into kind of different tiers, different levels, different groups.
Yeah, this seems like a really bad time to have this conversation. So why have it now? Ned?
Well, the answer to that is people have been talking about this for years. But we who framed this proposal and framed this approach toward rectifying this problem, we started talking about this late summer, early fall of last year that we started having these conversations and trying to figure out, is there some way we can remedy this problem that the people who depend on these contracts, who work these contracts and depend on them to support themselves and their families, are overwhelmingly outvoted by people who either have no stake in the contract because they don't work it over very long periods of time, have a very minimal stake, or have a direct conflict of interest like the many producers, crew members, et cetera, who hold SAG cards and are entitled to vote in these contract votes, but obviously would only be hurt if actors hold out for a better contract. That's a very dangerous situation. And the time to mitigate it was a very long time ago, but the people who finally decided to do something about it in this instance, we've done it as fast as we could.
So let me go back to something we were talking about before, which is how do you define a working actor? So let me ask you, Ron, how should you define
Well, I want to take one step back because I think before you define whether it's a working actor, you have to define whether an actor is capable of working. A collective bargaining agreement between three actors and an employer is not just an agreement between the employer and the actor who gets the job. That's not actually even its fundamental purpose. The fundamental purpose of a collective bargaining agreement is it's an agreement between the three actors that no matter which one of those actors gets the job, the other two actors are making an agreement and a promise not to undersell him. Even if they're offered that job by the employer in an effort to lower the price of actors' rates, they're going to say no. So the most important component of any union contract, of any collective bargaining agreement, is in fact the two actors who don't work and who are willing to stand on the sidelines and continue not working unless they're offered the same rates that the working actor is.
That is, without a union, you'd have a bidding process.
You have a bidding process which always works its way down to the lowest price.
I can name that tune for $15,000.
Exactly. If you have 11 actors and 10 jobs, it's the 11th actor who's not working who's going to decide what everybody gets paid.
Well, so Ron, are you saying that if people are not allowed a contract ratification vote, that they would then say, oh, fie to the idea of union, we'll just go out and do the work anyway, so that we will eventually race to the bottom? It runs counter to their interest if they actually do want to do union work and get a good union job. I mean, the Writers Guild, which implemented a much more far-reaching set of reforms than we are proposing here, they just concluded a successful strike. And there were a great number of members of the Writers Guild who were not entitled to vote in that election, and yet their members who weren't able to vote maintained solidarity because they understand that it is in their best interest for the union to secure a strong contract so that when they do work, they'll benefit from it.
Well, it's interesting that you bring that up, Ned, because the Writers Guild arrangement has been presented as an example, and it's said that they have this effective member or qualified voting. But the way the Writers Guild works is that you have 7 years to get one job. That's one job, any contract under the WGA. You have 7 years to maintain voting rights. If 7 years go by and you don't get that one job, then you are put on, I believe they call it post-current status.
That's right.
For post-current status, you do remain a member of the WGA and you do not vote on contracts. However, you don't have to pay dues either.
Then
Sure.
this is a question I want to ask you. If the standard were 1 day per year, if that were the proposal that we had set forth, would you agree to that?
It's not a question of whether I would agree with it.
Well, you're the person I'm talking to, so I'd like to know if you would agree to it. Personally, I think that any proposal that the membership would accept would be acceptable to me. I think that a large part of the SAG membership, if you told them we can still audition for SAG work and we don't have to pay dues, they'd be more than happy to give up their contract voting rights for that period of time. But I think that's a decision that they have to be allowed to make. It goes back to the very definition of what you mean by effective membership.
Ned Vaughn?
You know, it does say that contracts have to be ratified by the membership affected thereby. It doesn't say the entire membership or all members in good standing.
But if a contract tells me that I can't seek work for less than what that contract specifies, then that contract affects me.
So why do you think it doesn't say the entire membership?
Well, because it doesn't apply. It doesn't apply to members who are not actively seeking work in that field. The dancer contract, I'm not a dancer. Not only am I not offered dancer jobs or I haven't worked dancer jobs, I'm not even actually seeking them. Right, but we don't know. These contracts are not for past work.
Right, but Ron, you could seek any work that the Guild covers at any time. We're never going to know what you will do in the future.
If you're just joining us, we're talking to Ron Livingston and Ned Vaughn. They're two working actors on opposite sides of an argument, whether to allow only quote-unquote affected members to vote on SAG's new contract or to give every member a say. And who gets to vote on the contract may contribute to whether or not there's a strike. I think the most interesting question that we have not answered yet is, how do you define a working actor? And I'd be curious to know how you define it. We'll start, I guess, with Ron, and we'll go to Ned.
Well, I know that in my years, some of the hardest working I've ever done was looking for work. We all have times when we're working, and we all have times when we're not. In 1996, which was the year after I made Swingers, I made, I think, $4,960-some on that. Under Ned's proposal, I would have been considered a non-working actor, and I wouldn't have been entitled to have any say on the home video or the cable provisions of the contracts. Office Space, which I worked the next year, a couple of years after that I got Sex and the City. Those jobs did most of their business on cable and DVD. And so as it turns out, those provisions of those contracts, which were negotiated by the union of which I was a member and of which I was working, they had an enormous effect on me and on how much money I made from those projects and how much money they continue to draw in. But under this proposal, I would have been shut out of any voting on that decision.
Ned, how do you define a working actor?
Pretty simply, somebody who actually works under the contracts that the union provides, some minimal amount. And I do want to ask you this, Ron. Does it bother you that Les Moonves can vote and cancel out your vote on a contract that you're negotiating against him?
It doesn't bother me because Les Moonves is one studio mogul among 120,000 Screen Actors Guild members.
But there are thousands of people who meet his. I mean, they may not be studio moguls, but they have direct conflicts of interest with you.
That's why you have a vote, is so that people's voices can be heard. If Les Moonves likes to act from time to time, and he has different concerns than my concerns.
Well, he hasn't acted in over 20 years or 15 years.
If he's not actively seeking work, then I don't believe that he would be affected by the contract. But
exactly, and he shouldn't be voting upon it. That's exactly my point, because as the father of 5 children who is not a star, who needs to piece together job for job, just let me finish. I depend on these contracts to feed my family, and it bothers me enormously that the producers who hire me, who have a clear direct conflict of interest, can vote against me in a contract ratification vote. That's a very serious concern.
This has been brought up a number of times, and I think it's a bit of a canard. The idea that the mass of the SAG membership is sort of populated with all of these moles who are going to vote for a bad contract and stymie the people that are actually doing the work. The fact of the matter is that nobody's going to have a chance to vote on a contract until it's presented by the negotiating committee and by the board. So what I can't quite get clear from the other side is whether they're afraid that all of these people are going to vote yes on a bad contract or vote no to a good one.
Well, it's an open question. It's an interesting question. It's unfortunately a question we're not going to answer here today. We're out of time. Ron Livingston and Ned Vaughn are both working actors in Hollywood and active members of SAG, clearly. Ron's credits include the films Swingers, Office Space, and the upcoming July release, The Time Traveler's Wife. Ned Vaughn has earned his bread and butter working for various and sundry, his words not mine, TV shows for decades. He can be seen in the upcoming film by Ron Howard, Frost Nixon. My thanks to them both. Ron, Ned, thanks for being on the business.
Thank you, Claude.
Thanks very much.
After a short break, everything you wanted to know about that buttery popcorn topping, but we're afraid to ask. You're listening to The Business from NPR. You're listening to The Business, and I'm Claude Brodesser-Ackner. Every year, movie theater owners and their vendors descend on Las Vegas for the annual confab known as ShoWest. Studio chiefs and execs from the exhibitor chains make keynote speeches, and there are screenings of upcoming releases complete with introductions by big stars. There are seminars discussing best practices, business trends, and new technology. And then there is the trade show, where vendors from around the world hawk pop to popcorn, and everything in between. We sent producer Matt Holtzman to ShoWest to check out that everything in between part that goes into the enjoyment of your movie-going experience.
There are a lot of conventions going on in Las Vegas at any one time, so don't just tail any old guy with a badge around his neck to find your way through the casino. I did, and ended up following a full-figured fellow into the heavy equipment convention. That's a true story. Anyway, after asking for directions, I finally made it to the bowels of Bally's, where I began to see large freestanding posters advertising movies, nacho cheese sauce, and fancy new digital projection technology. Replacing the old system of making physical movie prints was a big topic at this year's ShoWest, but there was still a lot of old school stuff being sold at the trade show in the cavernous convention center.
Hugh DeHart with the little giant ladders. We sell ladders that can work over stadium seating.
My name is Carolina Caparelli, and I'm with Lawrence Metal Products, and we do queuing systems.
Cashier number 2, please.
My name is Ed McEntee, and I'm here with the USA Searchlights, and we've designed searchlights here for cinemas and rental companies.
Movie premieres and...
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
Philip Wood, I'm the president of TicketSoft, and we write software for movie theaters.
Walking the floor, you'll find booths for companies that repair torn seats and companies that put LED lights under auditorium stairs. You'll also find guys selling brightly covered flooring and machines for de-stickifying those floors. And then there is the company responsible for all that stickiness. I called this Coke World because it was ginormous and everything was done up in red. Cute girls wearing lots of makeup wore an endless amount of Coke products. Their display is a bit ostentatious, but I guess they can afford it. Renee Ludwig is a sales executive for Coke.
What percentage of theaters carry Coke in its products?
87% of the channel serves Coca-Cola.
To maintain their soda hegemony, they're always looking for new products to expand their line. Energy drinks are coming next. Greg McCall reps another new brand, Odwalla Juice. They almost missed the boat with bottled water.
Our competitor came out with a product about 3 years before us and did a very good job. And a lot of people, I think, weren't sure that people would spend, $1, $1.50 for water.
But the vast majority of customers in theaters and here at ShoWest stick to Coke. And I sure did, slurping samples until my hand was shaking. In fact, there was enough sugar available everywhere at ShoWest to easily bring on an immediate case of adult-onset diabetes. For every established concession brand like Nestle's Venerable Goobers and Raisinets, there are a few other imitators trying to get a piece of their candy action. And everyone is giving away free samples. It makes the popcorn you smell everywhere at ShoWest seem downright wholesome. C. Cretors and Company of Chicago makes classic popcorn machines for theaters.
Most people say when they walk into a movie theater, what hits them first is the smell of that popcorn that drives them to the concession stand. So,
Andrew Cretors is the president of Cretors and Company.
Your name is the same name as the name of the company.
That's right, yeah. I'm the 5th generation of our company.
I was going to say it was established in 1885. Did the company do popping machines even back then?
1885 is the year of my great-great-grandfather's peddler's license, where he was actually selling popcorn out on the streets of Chicago. Back then, popcorn really wasn't known. It was a new product. We say that we invented the business of popcorn, and it's really true.
With the whole ethanol thing and the price of corn potentially going up,
yeah.
You think that's going to affect your business?
Oh, it already has quite a bit, because more and more farmers are seeing more profits out of selling corn to ethanol producers. So popcorn, of course, being a crop, is now competing for land. So the cost of popcorn goes up. So it becomes more important to the people who are selling corn to maximize what we call the expansion of the corn. So we developed equipment that actually allows that corn to pop to its greatest potential, thereby maximizing profits because it's reducing the costs to the people who are selling the corn.
Less corn, more volume, basically.
Exactly.
Andrew Cretors brought huge air-popping machines to test at ShoWest, but of course the vast majority of all popcorn is still popped in oil.
My name is Glenda Barrett, and I'm with Ventura Foods. We basically use 4 different types of oil for popping corn.
Why would somebody choose one versus the other?
If the customer is health conscious, concerned about saturated fats, then the theater chain will want to use an oil with low saturated fats. But there's a trade-off. Coconut oil has high saturated fats, but it has a longer shelf life. It doesn't gum the kettle. It's crispy. The corn will be crispier than with some of the other oils. It'll stay crispy longer.
You also have a couple of toppings that you offer.
When you have a topping that's buttery but not butter, what is it usually made of?
All of our toppings are soybean oil based. They all contain beta carotene to give them the color, a buttery coloring. To some people, it may have a very strong butter flavor. It may have a very mild butter flavor, depending on what the population in a particular geographical area is used to. For instance, people in the South, we're used to strong spices, flavorful foods, so we're going to want a strong butter flavor on our popcorn. People who are raised in the dairy areas, Wisconsin, are going to want something that tastes more like butter, and butter really does not have a strong flavor.
Not only were there a lot of concession products represented at ShoWest, there were even people like Bruce Proctor who make concession stands. Proctor & Company of Colorado has been in the business since the early 70s.
Today, more than half of my projects involve lounges and bars.
I was going to say, this doesn't look much like a concession stand. It looks like a kind of a high-end bar that we're with neon lights and glasses and wine bottles.
I think you're seeing evidence of baby boomers and cinema owners trying to bring them back. Frankly, trying to do away with, in some cases, with the kids with the text messaging and chomping the gum and so forth.
Now, I live in Los Angeles, and I'm not surprised to see theaters with these kind of features there, but are you telling me that this is a trend across the country?
It is a trend across the country. We've done it on all points, and they've started out in the major metropolitan areas, and now we're starting to see it trickle down into places like Huntsville, Alabama.
It does actually make a lot of sense, since theaters make their money primarily on concessions, and certainly the price of an alcoholic beverage, you can charge a hell of a lot more for that than you can for a Coke.
That's true.
Just had a thought that that a distributor that puts out a really lousy movie should be encouraging alcohol consumption.
Absolutely.
But probably the single most popular product on display at ShoWest is theater seating, because you can say you're sampling the product when what you're really doing is resting your tired dogs. Tell me your name and what you're doing here.
John Fennell, the cinema sales manager for Seating Concepts. We manufacture auditorium seating for movie theaters.
Fancy seating from the looks of it.
Well, everything's really gone upscale. Seating is sort of the last frontier in what we can do to differentiate ourselves in the movie theater auditoriums.
It seems to me that I go into a theater and some of the seats have arms that go up and sometimes they don't.
The evolution was to have a rocker with a lift-up armrest because everyone felt you had to have it. After years of going down that road, now people are saying, maybe the lift-up armrest isn't such a good thing. And I have a lot of customers that are switching back to, they want to have the rocker movement, but not necessarily the lift-up armrest, because then they have to have an usher go through after every show and put them back down, and then you have other concerns of behavior in the auditorium.
For The Business, I'm Matt Holzman at ShoWest in Las Vegas.
4208, 40 amp. Oh, this is a huge volume prior. Okay.
And that's The Business. Matt Holzman produced and edited today's program with production assistance from Ray Guarna. Our associate producer is Darby Maloney. You can listen to this or any past program online anytime at kcrw.com/thebusiness. You can also podcast the show on KCRW's site or through iTunes. Our email address is thebusiness@kcrw.org. The Business is produced by KCRW Santa Monica and distributed by National Public Radio. I'm Claude Brodesser-Ackner. We'll see you next week on The Business.